Nintendo have always been connoisseurs of cool controllers. I mean, just look back at their console history and see what they've made. I'm sure you've seen that recently Nintendo has been discussing revolutionizing the video game controller, Miyamoto talking about bringing forth a new era of what that experience even is. But after all their gimmicks and their current success, where controllers are now, should they even be trying to revolutionize something that's already pretty great?
Yeah, Nintendo's no stranger to doing weird things with controllers. At one point, we were all playing with nunchucks, Zach. And of course, the gamepad...
Dangerous weapons in our hands.
The gamepad brought us to what the Switch is now, and they did a really good job with that. But at some point, I feel like things are like pretty good as they are. There's a reason why the wheel hasn't changed, right? Once the wheel got invented, reinventing the wheel is a good term and everything, but they've been the same for a very long time.
Very valid point. Let's get into exactly what they said here, and then we'll discuss whether or not this might be the right or wrong move. So they were asked at a recent shareholders Q&A about the game controller, about the traditional experience of holding a controller in your hands and looking at a screen, and do they foresee that changing? And Miyamoto had this to say: "I also believe that we should quickly graduate from the current controller, and we are attempting all kinds of things. Our objective is to achieve an interface that surpasses the current controller, where what the player does is directly reflected on the screen, and the user can clearly feel the result. This has not been achieved yet. We have tried all kinds of motion controllers, but none seem to work for all people. As the company that knows the most about controllers, we have been striving to create a controller that can be used with ease and that will become the standard for the next generation." So this is way off in the future. They're obviously always R&Ding a whole lot of different things, but do we want them to reinvent what already feels pretty great?
For me, I personally don't. I think iteration is probably a better step instead of reinvention, because with some of what Miyamoto is saying has me thinking that we're going to put a helmet on our head and control these things with our mind, because he wants something that's going to work for everyone. And in my experience, I don't know about you, I could hand a Joy-Con to a very old person, a very young person, they will figure it out. It's a very, very simple and intuitive. So I don't know, like, the threshold that they're trying to like meet there when it comes to having something that just like works for everyone, when I feel like this already does.
Well, we've seen them attempt that, right? With the Wii, they tried to be at the forefront of motion gaming, and they tried to have something that everyone could enjoy, and for a while it worked super well. I think a really important side question here is, does this ease or does this evolution service the games that you're trying to make? Because at the end of the day, to me, that's what's most important, right? Fun games that are enjoyable, that have depth, that work well with whatever method you have implemented. So the Wii didn't bring about the best games ever. It brought about some very good ones, especially from Nintendo. They're usually masters of their controller craft. But for other companies, and I think for a lot of players, it ended up falling short. And then you look at the Wii U gamepad, which had really cool ideas and some gimmickry that yielded some awesome games, but did it have longevity? Not really. Now they're here with the Switch, something that has found a lot of success. And some may argue that the Joy-Con are gimmicky in their own right? They have HD rumble, they split apart, they can be rotated. That's pretty cool. But if we're talking about taking the video game controller as it is now as a whole, right? So we look across the board to the Xbox One controller, the DualShock 4, the Pro controller even, and we say that needs to be reinvented because it's not accessible enough for every player. It's not easy enough for every player. It doesn't have, that one-to-one direct reflection that he's referencing. I think maybe they've gotten pretty close. We look at something like Splatoon 2 with the gyro aiming. That's a great experience.
It really is. And I worry that by trying to appeal to everyone, because yes, we want everyone to be able to enjoy games, but I feel like that's the case already. And if you want to simplify it even more, we end up with like mobile controls, things like that, where there's like not even real buttons. And we've seen that there was like patents for a controller with like no buttons on it, that you just like use your hands on the screen. I'm not with that at all. I don't like the way that functions on phone games right now, because there are games that control like that, Fortnite, things like that.
Sure.
No, I don't want that. For me, I think that what we have with like something, the Xbox Elite controller, like that's like the peak for controllers.
Modular.
Yeah. Let me be able to change the sticks around a little bit. Give me some pads on the back just for like more like hardcore games that you got to be like super quick, so you got to remove your fingers. Give me real triggers. The Switch and the Pro controller right now don't have like fully like functional like triggers. It's just like a button. There's no like halfway points or anything like that.
Right.
It's just like analog stuff. So yeah, if they can perfect what they already have, I feel like we do have a device that's perfect for everyone.
Yeah, and maybe that could be a way, sort of an amalgamation, a bringing together of the best elements of controllers to form the ultimate controller, and one that does have a little bit of flexibility for players. We've seen patents in the past of interchangeable buttons and interchangeable layouts, which I think is a solid idea. I worry how far that goes, and knowing Nintendo, they may go very far if that's the right. I think my biggest pause, my biggest fear is they love to push boundaries, and in some ways that's great. They've done some incredible things, but I don't know that the controller itself is maybe where the boundary needs to be pushed more than just, as you said, refined. And this sounds like they're talking about a whole new world of controller experience as opposed to just bettering what they have. And I think, go back even to the N64, we're holding a 3-prong controller. Plenty of fun there, not necessarily the best experience. And then the GameCube, throw it in a C-stick. It was cool, but is it the best experience for games? The Wii, cool motion, is it the best experience for games? Now, with the Switch, I feel like they have refined a lot of their past ideas. Let's just double down on that. Do we really need to have, as you said, a holographic projection in our head that allows us to move the characters with our mind? And honestly, how far off is this revolution of control? I'm not so sure, but I hope that they don't get too absorbed with redefining that they end up losing the proficiency that they've already established.
Zach, if you think that there isn't a ton of third-party support right now on Switch, imagine if there's like a completely different like control method for whatever comes next for Nintendo. Yeah,
that's the thing. And you look at like those patents of those screen controllers where there aren't any physical buttons, and it's all you can move the buttons around, but it's just all digital. I don't think that's a future that at least the hardcore want in any way.
And I do want to just like make note. We know that these patents just like didn't happen, and they probably like turned into the Switch. We're not saying that this is the next one. I wanted to make that very clear. But even with like PlayStation 5 and Scarlet, they're gonna have traditional controllers, and you're already not gonna compete with them in terms of power and things like that. The last thing Nintendo needs is one more barrier for third parties, because Nintendo makes amazing games, but they can't live off of them alone. Like, hey, Wii U, hi. Like, yes, awesome Nintendo games, but third party just wasn't there. The platform died. That's what happens. And even now, we're getting third party stuff. Yeah, it's a little bit older and things like that, but it's helping the Switch maintain a steady pace in between the Nintendo releases. When you're just so different than the other guys, I feel like that's just a barrier that is very hard to overcome.
Well, they love to take on unique challenges, and the games have been great on Switch, so maybe they feel like, hey, we perfected gameplay in this plane, and now we need to evolve into a whole different type of I mean, if you look at his verbiage here, right, he says our objective is to achieve an interface that surpasses the current controller, where what the player does is directly reflected on the screen, and the user can clearly feel the result. To me, what they have with HD Rumble and with Gyro does achieve that already. I feel like they are where they want to be, and I'm frankly happy. I know not everyone loves the Joy-Con. They have their limits, but Pro Controller-wise, could it be tweaked a bit? Yes. I like your idea, Gabe, of having more selectable sticks. Obviously, that's going to increase cost if now we have like choice between, hey, this D-pad or this stick.
Hey, Pro Controller is expensive already, so.
Right, so that's going to then increase that a lot. So there obviously is give and take, but I feel like what they've wanted to reach, they say they know the most about controllers. Well, you're doing a pretty darn good job. And just refine that versus, Koshioda said, we have not yet invented an all-purpose controller that is unlike any of the current devices. It doesn't have to be unlike the current devices.
Yeah, it feels unnecessary, right? Refine, improve, make better, give us a better D-pad, like things like the Joy-Con doesn't even have a D-pad. So make sure that stuff is good, make the triggers better. I think we're fine. We're fine. Nobody is having like a barrier to gaming with these controllers. Like most people, right? Because there are accessibility issues, stuff like that that we won't get into here. But the majority of people that don't play games, it's not because the controller's too cumbersome or too difficult.
I mean, it could be the like time experience of like I don't know how to use two sticks.
Yeah, but you learn.
I need to work on that. But the controllers are not so difficult or cumbersome that you can't improve. You can't gain that skill. And I think that change is exciting. Change is very alluring, especially in a whiz-bang presentation. But at the end of the day, Nintendo has hit a sweet spot, and I think controllers in general have hit a sweet spot. I hope they don't be so committed to revolution that they end up losing something along the way. But just to ease your concerns, if this worries you in any way, Furukawa did say that he hopes the Switch stays around for as long as possible. So this is something that probably won't have any effect for a very long time if it ever comes to be. But let us know what you think of Nintendo's headspace changing controllers. Throughout the years, they have always been unique in their design. But maybe they hit a sweet spot, and maybe they should settle there, at least in that way. Let us know your take in the comments down below. What would you like to see? A modular controller? That's kind of where we lie in terms of an improvement. We would like something that does allow you for a little more flexibility and specification in your buttons, your sticks, your D-pad, your triggers. Outside of that, though, don't need to reinvent the wheel. As Gabe said, the wheel works just great. Until next time, everybody, thanks so much for watching. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. For myself and Gabe, SwitchForce, out.